Hello, I am Charles Musgrove, your host of Business Matters. I am with the Bean Team, and welcome back for another exciting show. We are getting tuned up for our radio show that's on 11:30 Sunday mornings on Real Talk 93.3. Check out our prior shows. We've recorded all of our shows. They're on Apple Podcasts. They're now on iHeart. Look for Business Matters, and you'll find it under those two platforms. Also, we have the shows recorded on YouTube. And look for Bean Team on YouTube, and you'll see all of our shows there. We have the full show recorded on YouTube. We've got some notes inside of the description of each one of the shows. So take a look there. Subscribe to the channel, like it, and leave us some comments. We'd love to hear from you and respond to the questions you've got about the shows, or if you've got ideas about future shows, let us know in those comments. Also, you can email me. My email is cmusgrove@beanteam.com. So let us know what you want to talk about. We have some of the really best subject matter experts in the area. We talk about a lot of business matters, issues that matter to the business owner, to the employees inside the business, how to run a business, how to stay compliant, how to stay legal, how to do things the best they can to make their business the best it can be. Today is no exception. We have on the show today Terry Madigan. Terry is an attorney in Tallahassee, Florida. Terry, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you. I like you talk about Business Matters. That's a good name for the show.
It is.
Business Matters. Yeah.
Business Matters, yeah. It's and today, legal issues matter, right?
Yep. Legal issues always matter.
They do.
They go, and it's the way of the world. It goes hand in hand with business. You know, everything you do in business these days seems there's some legal consideration. You know, sometimes it's good, a lot of times it's just a pain, but you got to deal with it.
You got to deal with it. It's when you try to ignore things, even though you may not like to deal with it, even though you know it's going to be a thorny subject or something that's going to be difficult, if you ignore it, it's only going to make it worse, because I think usually those things do crop their head, and you have to deal with them in the future. And if you haven't appropriately dealt with them on the front end, they're going to be 10 times as worse on the back end. When things
are good, they're good. When things go bad, they can be really bad if you haven't done some initial upfront prep work for it.
Yeah, it is. And it's Terry, you mentioned the I guess the dominance, or just how many legal issues that you have to deal with in a business. And it's funny you said that, because a lot of the shows that we have, we're hosting attorneys, and we talk about legal issues, legal matters, because that's like you said, that's really important to make sure we deal with that correctly.
Yep.
There's so many potholes out there to deal with, even on the outside of running the business. You can be a great operator, a great business runner, or have a great business, but if you don't deal with that other stuff, it can jeopardize the whole business.
I recommend I do a lot of work with a lot of small businesses, and try to get at the point where just if there's an issue, call me. I mean, it's not going to cost that much. Sometimes, if it's a regular client, I may not even charge. But 5-minute conversation. If there's something, if you're not quite sure it's legal or the way you do it, check with your attorney. That's kind of what we do. Sometimes advice I'll give is more common sense than legal, but having somebody kind of objective outside and say, well, did you think of this, and da-da. And I've learned a lot about business and things to watch out for by virtue of my clients' mistakes.
Exactly.
So, I've got a number of years of seeing how not to do things.
Yeah, I think that's a great point that you made, but it's funny you said that. I had a meeting this afternoon with a client, and one of the things we talked about when we left was, hey, don't try to learn everything yourself and pay the cost of that knowledge.
Yep.
Lean on people that understand it and have done it before, so you don't have to pay that price, because
learn from their mistakes.
Exactly. Learning firsthand, maybe it's valuable, but man, it can be expensive.
Yeah.
So why go through that? Lean on people like yourself or other professionals or people that have gone through it before, and learn from what they've done. Get the shortcuts. It's okay.
Yeah. No, just ask. Ask before you leap.
Yeah. It's now.
I can't tell you the number. Just basic business number of times where I've gotten a call from a client or potential client wants me to look at over a contract, and they've already signed it.
Yeah.
And like, I can look at it. I could tell you shouldn't have done this.
Right.
But
it's too late, right?
You've already committed yourself,
Yeah. So now we already have to start figuring out a way to mitigate that risk that you just signed on to. Yeah, let's do it right the first time. I'm a strong believer in that.
do not sign the contract before you call your attorney.
Yeah, that's right.
Do a whole lot more before you sign it.
Yeah. So, we were talking a few minutes ago. You're a native Tallahassean. So
I am.
I think that is. I won't say that's rare, but I think that's really special to have you on the show. And you grew up in Tallahassee. You went to high school here.
Yep.
You went to Florida State to get your law degree. So and you've hung your shingle here and you've stayed here your whole career. So I think that's commendable and.
Don't have any immediate plans to leave either.
Good. Well, I know the residents of Tallahassee are glad that you're going to stay. So, I think that's cool that you're connected that much to the community and the Tallahassee area and the people that are here. Because what we do, what you do, what I do it's about relationships, working with your clients, providing them the best service that you can. If you can't do that, you're going to bring in another professional that can help them solve their issue.
Yep, I try to, and that's I'm a solo practitioner. In years past, I've worked with medium-sized, really big firms, smaller firms, and now I work on my own, which means there's some things I can't do it the way I would want it to be done. So it's very often that I will affiliate or associate with other attorneys. It helped the client. Number one, the client's not out there trying to find somebody cold to do something particular. I can help the client get somebody who I know would fit, and I don't duplicate the work, but I can still stay involved if it's something my client is interested in, and that seems to work well for me. And again, being around here for a number of years, I've got a pretty good idea of there's a lot of attorneys in town.
There's a lot,
and most of them are real good, but there's some that are better than others, or some that some attorneys, the personality might not mesh with a particular client, and
that's
I can
right.
probably see that up front. I mean, my personality doesn't mesh with everybody who calls me up, but you can kind of learn from dealing with these folks. I can at least get you a good start on things.
Yeah, I think that's important, and that's what our clients look to us for. Is okay. I may know that Terry or Charles can't do this themselves. This may not be their expertise, but they're going to connect me with somebody that's been vetted, somebody that they think can really help solve the problem.
Somebody's got the niche, the specialty.
That's right, because we're in a world of specialties. Whether it's you want to go to the right doctor, you want to go to the right accountant, somebody that's done that before, and you don't want those professionals learning on you. They had to learn someplace, but
right, not necessarily on me if I can avoid it.
Exactly. Well, that is. Let's talk about what we're going to kind of chat about in the show. I think we're going to carry this a little bit further. A little bit deeper into the radio show that we record.
Okay.
I know you kind of describe yourself as a general practitioner for the lawyers. So with that, I'm assuming you deal with business owners, you deal with contract issues, with just how to set up the right kind of business structure.
I try. And a lot of it is, setting up business structure, not a big deal. LLC, corporation, whatnot. A lot of that has to do with, setting up the books the right way, which I tell people that's really an accountant thing. Make sure you start out. I don't give accounting advice, but small businesses that are starting or, already long-established businesses, I try to help them on anything they need. Employee issues to contracting issues. And, again, if I can't handle it, I'll get somebody who can. I try to keep my clients out of court.
Right. That's good.
Yeah. When necessary, I go into court, litigated a lot, but it's a lot better for the client to try to avoid that if at all possible.
Yeah. Avoid that. When you see it coming, do everything you can to keep them out of that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's not like on TV.
Take the other fork in the road.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about, when we start the show, let's talk about some, we will not use the names of your clients. We'll change the names to protect the innocent, but there may have been some issues with setting up contracts or business relationships or family businesses or things like that we can talk about that I think will be helpful for those listening to, okay, this is what happened, this is how we could have done it a little bit differently to avoid this issue.
Yeah. Generally, if you're any type of a partnership, whether it's legal partnership or you're just going into business with a friend, acquaintance, another professional or whatnot, it really helps to get a lot of the understandings in writing. You probably know when they start out in business, everybody's kind of thinks they're on the same page, we're friendly, excited, and whatnot. But sometimes the pressures of business will all of a sudden create fissures between family members, which is really bad, and just business partners. And you can't write an agreement to cover every possibility. I mean, that would be hundreds of pages. But, an idea of an agreement is this is kind of our baseline. If we do things a little different and nobody objects, it's okay. But if it gets to an issue where I'm not real happy with what you're doing, let's stick to what we wrote down and signed off on.
Right.
It doesn't have to be overly complicated, but I've seen too many occasions where there wasn't a real understanding going in. Again, and it's sad because it'd be friends maybe or family members. Those are the worst when you have family generational issues and all of a sudden, one of them goes rogue.
Yeah.
And that's the worst of the worst.
It can happen. So let's hit on that. We'll talk about independent contractor contracts, just the formal documents that you recommend or that you worked with on that. And if you have any other issues that kind of
I'd be happy
pop
to talk about it. Just please understand this is not legal advice to anybody in particular. These are generalities. That's a disclaimer. So
exactly. I like that.
Do not rely on what I'm saying, even though hopefully I'm right.
And we actually put that in our the notes we put on YouTube also. This is not legal advice.
Okay, good.
So we got you covered on that. So, John, with that, why don't you play us a little music and we'll start the show.
Welcome to the Business Matters Talk Show with Charles Musgrove. On Business Matters, we discuss the issues that matter to your business. Find more episodes on Apple Podcast, YouTube, and BeanTeam.com. And now here's your host, Charles Musgrove.
Welcome back and good morning. I am Charles Musgrove, your host with Business Matters, and I'm with the Bean Team right here in Tallahassee, Florida. You are listening to Real Talk 93.3. We've got more knowledge of nuggets. Today we've got Terry Madigan in the house, business lawyer, general practitioner, native Tallahassean. Terry, welcome to the house.
That's me. Thank you. Happy to be here.
All right, man.
I didn't know we were going out so wide on the World Wide Web. I mean, Apple, iHeart.
Man, we got it all.
Okay.
So if you miss a show, you can go catch it.
You can go catch it someplace else.
Exactly. So you can be riding down the road with your earphones in your head and listening to us on iHeart, Apple Podcast, or if you're sitting at your desk at work, you can watch us on YouTube also.
Wow.
So you got all the past shows there. So if you want to catch up on get some really good nuggets of knowledge, we've got them there. And today's not going to be an exception. We appreciate you coming into the house today for another great show.
I'm excited. Nuggets of knowledge. I like that.
You like that? Yeah. That's what we have, and that's
what I do. Nuggets of knowledge,
and we dispense that freely right here on Business Matters. So Terry, you grew up in Tallahassee.
I did.
You went to Florida State University. Go Noles.
Law school. Yep. And
we're glad you did that, and we're glad that you came back, and we are glad that you have made Tallahassee your lifelong home.
I am too. I've seen a lot of changes in this community. Mostly good. I still like it. I'm still here. It's different than when I started out here, but it's a growing still city. It's going to continue to grow. It's been an interesting ride to see things going along. Over the years, you start feeling like an old guy. So I remember when such and such, and your kids roll their eyes at you.
Yeah.
But it's.
Well, with all that experience with living here in Tallahassee, I know that you've got a lot of good information. You've learned a lot. You've helped a lot of people along the way, and that's really what the show is about. We try to help businesses that are grinding it out every day. They've got issues that they have to deal with, so we try to help them with. Let's talk about some of those issues that they may be dealing with, and maybe we can help them. Maybe we can impart some of those knowledge nuggets to them in our show.
Well, there's just so many things. As we were saying earlier before the show, it's kind of the way of the world. Business and law kind of go hand in hand. I mean, there's just always legal issues or legal considerations. You know? And I like to counsel my clients. If you got a question about something, you think it might not be quite legal, check with your attorney.
Yeah.
I mean, just bounce it off and see. And sometimes probably most times business owners, have done it for a while. Their instincts are right, but it's good to double check on it. And if something is not right, it's a prime opportunity to get it right before you go too far.
Yeah, and it's like you said, the business owner may be generally correct. They may be in the right ballpark, but they need to clean some things up just to make sure that the T's are crossed and the I's are dotted in either what they're doing, what they're communicating, or the document that they're preparing.
Yeah, and there are just some areas of business and law that you have to do things in a certain way that don't always quite make common sense.
Right.
But you've got to navigate through, different, you run like employment law in particular. It can get very complicated. I mean, just, from how you interview somebody to how you fire somebody and, special considerations, that's a minefield. And there are attorneys in this town and all over that's make their living on, you're Mr. Employer, you screwed up on this. And,
absolutely.
Pay up, even if it's innocent screw up.
Yeah, we've actually done shows on with employment lawyers that have talked about that. How do you deal with situations on termination of employees? That's usually where the sparks begin, is when you need to terminate somebody, and we've talked about should you terminate, how you terminate is important, and you want to make sure that you don't step in those potholes. You can do everything right, and there's still some kind of litigation that happens, but you want to make sure that you do as well as you can, both on the human side and on the legal side.
Yeah, you want to treat people right, but it used to be if you'd fire somebody, maybe unless it's really for cause. I mean, Florida is a right to work state, so you can fire somebody whether with or without cause. When it's with cause, that's mean you're saying they did something bad, so that's different. But somebody, if you're letting them off for a general layoff, you just can't afford them. Sometimes you got to be real careful. I mean, you can maybe someone give you 2 weeks or give you something, and can you sign this release for me, which is generally good practice. But there are special rules that kick in, for instance, for people over 40. People who may fall into a minority, you're in a protected class, and you can't just give them the money and say sign the paper. You've got to go through a whole procedure, and you end up with settlement agreements that are 10 pages long, small type, just to cover yourself and reference all the federal statutes. It's like, God, how did this happen? But that's kind of the nature of the law. There's been a bad situation someplace, and so they got to make a law about it, and everybody else has to work around it.
Yeah, I think that is that's nugget number one for the day is if you're dealing with tough employee issues such as termination, layoff, or things like that, make sure that you consult with an attorney, an employment lawyer that can help you make sure that you have the right documentation, that you handle it correctly, that you're in compliance, and you want to make sure that you have the best human approach and communication as well.
And document.
Absolutely.
And that is so hard. That's easier to say. I mean, whenever you have an interaction with an employee, particularly if they've done something wrong or whatnot, write them up, a disciplinary report, explain it to them. If you can get them to sign, acknowledge it, great. What happens, though, in reality, particularly you got a small business with a few employees, that they're close. Sometimes they're kind of like family. Well, I'm not going to write up something that Johnny did. I mean, he's going to do better. And then by the time he does it the 10th time and you fire him, Johnny says, well, how'd that happen? And you got nothing in writing to dispute it.
Yeah, it is. You're exactly right. It's tough to have that conversation. It's tough to whip out the paper and have them sign it, but man, that can just save everybody a lot of pain and grief in the future.
Yeah, it is. You just got to be businesslike. And it's same thing in a family setting, a family business. You got to be businesslike.
Right. Now, we kind of jumped on I would say the micro when we're dealing with the employer-employer relationship when we have, let's say, a divorce. So a termination is like a divorce. So you either you agree to depart, or there's a one-sided we're gonna have a departure. In a more of a macro standpoint, we have the business contracts, or what are the documents that should be set up initially when partners go into business. When a business is set up and you're going to have more than one owner, whether that's a family member or not.
Yeah, typical small startup company. You set yourself up. These days, most companies form as a limited liability company. There's LLCs, and then there's corporations, S corporations, and there's there are attorneys who argue both ways as to which better. They're kind of nuanced. I typically set somebody up as an LLC, and all that is, it's a document you file with the state of Florida that says I'm setting up Bean Team LLC.
Right.
You put in certain guidelines. It's going to be run this way. So and so is the general manager, a member, or whatnot. You don't have to disclose everybody who's involved in the business, but there has to be something, a legal entity, so somebody can kind of figure out who it is they're dealing with. And then if it's more than one person, do what we call an operating agreement. In fact, you can do an operating agreement for one person. I can tell you stories about that. And again, that's kind of the agreement between you and me is to, okay, when decisions had to be made, I mean, are we 50-50 or are we 51-49? It's kind of tough when you're 50-50 ownerships if you got to vote on something.
That's right, it is.
So you kind of lay out, I mean, who's going to make the decisions? Somebody's got to be in charge. Somebody's got to be the face of the business, even though you both have an investment in it. And, of course, the more people you have involved in it, the more important that becomes. I mean, I've done agreements, in my own, practice, with former partners, if we, let's say, bought our office building, we put together an agreement, maybe 25 pages, That's what happens when you get a bunch of lawyers.
Right.
But you could have even longer than that, but it kind of, and it's one of those things, everything's working good, nobody ever reads it. It's when something goes bad, you go back and say, hey, you signed this here, and it protects everybody else that's involved. But
it does. Now, that is called an operating agreement.
Operating agreement,
So if you have an LLC, and you can have it like you started a single-member LLC, a multi-member LLC, the more you have, then obviously you need that operating agreement to kind of outline the playbook.
It's critical when you have more than one person involved. And you have what you said, single-member LLC. I mean, I could set up, and I am set up as a single-member. It's a kind of a variation, but a professional liability company. I'm the single member of it. But it always struck me as kind of strange. I've had clients who, they've set up as a single member LLC. They've gone to the bank, and the bank wants to see their operating agreement.
Right.
Okay. And I've done up a few. I mean, there's formats for do it, and I just say, look, take this to the bank, and it kind of just lays out some common things. You can always vote to change it.
Right.
But
the vote of one.
Go to the expense of having an operating agreement to show to the bank for just one person.
Yeah, that's a little silly.
But again, when it's 2, 3, 4, 5, it's important to have it.
Right, and that is like you said, that document, whether it's an LLC and you have the operating agreement, or if it's a corporation and you have a shareholder
agreement,
then
kind of very similar.
So that's going to lay out what do we do if.
Yeah, well, the rights and responsibilities, who's in charge, how are you going to split the profits, or, who's, liable for this, and then, baseline things about, this is how we're going to do the business, and if there's a problem, we go back to this. And like I said, people can do anything, I mean, as long as it's legal, you can do your business however everybody's happy with, but sometimes there comes a point where I'm no longer happy with how, John Doe, my partner, is doing it, so, hey, John, let's look at this agreement. Let's just kind of stick to the basic terms here.
Yeah,
and you've got the right to do that because you both signed off on it.
That's right. And a lot of those agreements, one of the sticky parts or the more difficult parts to address is the valuation. So if we have a divorce, or if somebody wants to leave, or if somebody's incapable of continuing, this is how we value the company, therefore value their portion of that company for their exit.
Yeah, and there's different. I'm sure you've seen different ways. I mean, you got book value, which doesn't necessarily represent what you could sell it for on the open market. But then, when you have a group that are in business together, very common in like an operating agreement. If one of them dies, well, we don't necessarily want to be in business with their spouse or their kids.
Exactly.
So you write it up as you have the right to buy it from their estate.
Right.
So that their estate, wife, husband, whatever, doesn't get into it. And you lay out a formula, and you want to be fair on those things. But, as far as you take a derivative of, book value, comparisons, appraisals, and whatnot, and you can say, let's say if it's $100,000, well, you may not have $100,000 to pay out all the time. So you build it in there. We can pay it out in 5 years, $20,000 a year. So you don't all of a sudden have this, huge obligation in there.
Yeah, that is very difficult because you can. A lot of times, what I've seen people do is they'll leave that section of the agreement blank, and it's like, okay, I know this may take some brain cells to figure this out, and really some tough conversations, but you need to do it at that point.
Do something at that point.
Yeah,
again,
it's
to everybody's benefit.
Absolutely, because you kind of laid out the two of the key elements is determining the value, is one, and that can be very simple, or it can be simple with a layer of complexity.
Yeah, and it's tough, particularly. I mean, we could set out book value. Okay, accountants, you figure out book value all the time. We could do some kind of appraised value, but let's say it's you and me in business. Well, if it's the Bean Team business, you're the Bean Team guy. Okay, so the business may be worth X today, but if you're gone and we put in John Doe, it's not the same.
That's right.
Even though he owns your shares, it's the value of the business is going to change. And you can't do it exactly, but you need to make some effort so that, particularly if you're the one who's going to be buying somebody out.
Absolutely.
You want to know that you have a right to do that and kind of what it's going to cost you.
That's right. And then the second part of that is after you've kind of settled on this is how we calculate the value, is how do we fund that?
Yeah.
So that's another layer of complexity. Are you going to be able to pay it over time? Do you have life insurance policies that's going to fund that? So that's another
very common. By Keyman Insurance, we have a policy that's there just for the purpose of if Johnny dies, we've got $100,000 because we know it's going to cost somewhere around that to buy his estate out, and maybe you can pay it in full there.
Right.
I'd say most small businesses don't have that. If they're smart, they at least have laid out something, but they've got a financial obligation. Okay, we got to buy out, otherwise we're going to be working with their spouse and their kids.
Right.
And that's when you want to set it out in terms. We pay it over time, and the deceased partner has signed off on that as well, so it binds his heirs, estate, executors, etc.
So I know you've been in business a long time, and you've probably seen a lot of things. If there's one common issue to deal with on the front end to relieve heartache and pain on the back end, when it comes to partners and businesses, what would that be?
Well, again, just put it in writing. If you've got your general expectations, I mean, it's going to be a little different for every business, and certainly there are, I call them canned operating agreements. I've got bunches. I got books full of them, but it's not really a one size fits all. Everything has to be kind of edited to fit your situation. But put your expectations down in writing, lay out in writing who's going to be in charge, lay out in writing how you're going to end the business. It doesn't have to be complicated.
No.
But it can be extremely complicated if you haven't made some plans in advance.
Exactly. So don't wait on perfection, because you can't afford perfection.
True. You'll never get perfection.
There will not be a perfect document. So, do something. Draw the line, make the decision, and move on.
Yep.
So that's really I'm sure that you've had a lot of issues where there's no documentation, and then it becomes, well, I remember this, or he said this, and that's a whole lot more difficult to defend or to get to resolve. And
that's when you get into litigating cases. What was said, and of course there's no writing to back it up. Credibility, and there are there are Florida laws or statutes that kind of deal with certain situations, but when you talk about the law, it's kind of a one size fits all.
Right.
It may be very different from what you would anticipate or what you would think about it. But those cases can get very, very difficult. And, sometimes, I've dealt with business disputes where both partners or whatever partner, they're acting in good faith. They just have a real difference of opinion. The ones that are really painful, though, are when, somebody's just outright thieving, lying, stealing, whatever. And I've seen that happen in the context of family businesses, and that's the worst.
Man, that is bad.
That's a nasty divorce plus a business breakup.
Man, I hate to hear that, because that is you've kind of mixed in family law and business law at the same time, and that's
not a good mixture.
That's just bad emotions, bad juju right there. So,
and those family businesses are usually the ones that are least likely to have written out a game plan or an operating, because we're family.
That's right.
Until we're not.
Who would ever think we would break up or things wouldn't stay this happy in the future? Yeah. So it is. It's kind of tough to say, but when you agree on going into business with someone, whether it's a friend, you don't know them, but you're going to go into business with another business person or a family member, that's the time, like you said, to put it in writing.
Put it in writing.
Get it documented. This is how we're going to operate, and if something happens in the future, this is how we're going to divorce.
Yep.
So get it in writing, and this is the same thing.
Prenuptial for business. And
the prenuptial for business, that's a good way to put that, but that's reality. It's families have divorces, husband and wives have divorces, business owners have divorces as well. So make sure that you document in advance. Before the emotions get heated, you're more rational on the front end because everything's going to be hunky-dory and rosy, and you can typically have a better judgment at that point.
Absolutely. Much more rational up front. Of course, up front, you're kind of thinking this will never happen, and that's when it's so easy to, I'm not going to worry about that.
Yeah.
That'll never happen to me.
Pay attention, but do it.
Yeah.
What else in your practice is it, this kind of ties in with wills and trusts. When you have your operating agreements set up right and you have those starting documents, there's also, let's make sure they're titled correctly, or we're looking into the future. How will this be passed on?
Right. And there is absolutely a tie-in, particularly in a family business, as to, when I die, who gets my business interest, Am I going to divide it up between my 3 children? Am I going to leave the business to Johnny and something else to the other 2 kids because Johnny's been in the business with me? Is Johnny going to have to, buy it out of the estate?
Right.
All kinds of considerations in there. So, because the idea is you don't want the business to all of a sudden be in limbo when you die. Like, oh my God, who's in charge? Who's in charge? You want to try to keep it going. A lot of times, particularly in a family situation, when let's say a father and son is kind of the common example. Father wants to pass the business to the son. When father starts getting 50s, 60s, or whatnot, it could start giving shares of the stock or membership interest in the LLC company away, can gift it to the son or can sell it or whatnot. So at some point, son's going to own a bunch of it, maybe eventually all of it while, the father is still alive. And as you know, there's some tax considerations with that, but you can give away a lot, without having a tax ramification on it. Keep records of it, but that kind of eases it. So when you do pass, it's already done, or at least it's in motion. But
right.
Again, don't leave those things to chance. I've known situations where somebody has they've died and they had a substantial business and they just didn't make any provisions. I tell you a story. Somebody came in basically a do-it-yourself will. Didn't even address the business. Well, the business, that's different, But, okay, who gets it? Who runs it?
Yeah.
In the meantime, who's in charge of it,
Yeah, you kind of painted out one of the good scenarios. If you have a family business or any business and you have a key person identified, if that's a family member, then that's really what you want to have, so that you can then identify that person both in spirit as well as legally, that they're going to be the person to carry on that business, and there's a financial part of that also that you have to address, but do that in advance. If you have a personal service business where it's really the key owners are the ones that are driving that business, then you have to address what happens if that person dies.
Yeah.
So will that business just go away? You've got employees to consider. You want to make sure that business continues for the sake of the employees, as well as continuing to generate income for the heirs and the estate.
Nothing like having a business that's floundering because all of a sudden this is in the absence of an agreement with your partners about rights to buy it out and whatnot, which would kind of overrule something to the contrary in the will,
right?
Particularly if the will doesn't even address it. But if you don't have things laid out, or you kind of own all the business and you die maybe without a will and you got 5 kids, okay, they each get a fifth of it, maybe.
Right. So what happens there?
Yeah, what happens there?
So the agreements we've talked about, number one is an employment agreement. Make sure that you document the exit of an employee correctly. Setting up a business correctly to make sure you have the operating agreement or the shareholder agreement, kind of the playbook in place with your partners at the beginning of when the business starts.
Right.
And now we're looking at the end of the deal would be your will or your trust documents that you've set up to handle the personal assets as well as business
assets.
Right.
And there's all sorts of mechanisms you can use. Sometimes a business will actually be put into a trust, and you have a trustee, which is somebody who capable of running the business, or at least capable of overseeing key employees who they would continue on in the business.
Right.
But you've got a mechanism. Somebody can immediately step in and be in charge, and there's not a fight among family members about who's going to be in charge of things.
Yeah. Do you have kind of a rule of thumb, will versus trust, or what kind of combination do you recommend there?
They're different things. They work together, but will is a document that basically says when I die, I want so-and-so to get this, and I want so-and-so to be in charge of making sure the other so-and-so gets this, your executor, administrator, personal representative. That goes through probate. A will will govern property that you own in your name individually to go through the probate process so that whoever you want to get it at the end can get clear title to it. I mean, you leave and you die and you leave a piece of property that's in your name. Well, there's got to be some way that your kids or whoever get it. They can't just go down to the courthouse and write something on a deed. And I've had people come to me and say, I went to, not too long ago that family member died. They did not have a will, had several small properties, and so we went down to the courthouse because we just wanted to change the deeds to put it in the kid's name. So it didn't work that way. No. Yeah, they won't do it. I mean, it makes sense, and everybody agreed this is what we want to do, but you have to go through a legal process so that you can pass clear title to your heirs, family members, or whatnot. You can set up under a will a trust, which basically says we've gone through this process, and I want the bulk of my money to go into a trust, and so is going to be the trustee. And the idea is that trust is going to dole out money over time, over a period of, it could be many years, to children, grandchildren, and whatnot, so that we don't drop a chunk of change on somebody who may be a child, a minor at that time, or maybe an adult legally but not ready to, have a bunch of money
emotionally or mentally. They're not ready for it.
And it's you can have trusts for. I've done trusts for elderly couples in their 80s who wanted to set up trusts for their kids in the 50s and 60s because they just weren't sure that it would be good to drop it all on them at one time.
Yeah, it's never too late. I've seen it. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but the trust can be more specific, and it's really a functioning entity once that person dies, and the will kind of is an umbrella that makes sure that we catch everything that's not already specified for the trust.
The will directs it through probate. Now, if husband and wife own a piece of property, let's say their house, okay, when husband dies, it kind of automatically becomes the wife's property, okay?
Right.
So that's not going to be subject to probate. If husband and wife have joint checking account, rights of survivorship, that becomes the survivors. That doesn't go through probate. It's really apropos when you have pieces of real estate or bank accounts that are just in my name, which is very common. You got to go through a process to pass it on. If you owe money and there's money there to be paid, you got to settle legitimate debts. There's always going to be expenses, that come up, and that's the way that's how we do it in this country. And it seems to work. I don't know if there's a better system for it.
I don't know, but it works.
But people complain about probate, and there's ways to avoid probate, but sometimes it's a good idea not to avoid probate, and that's you could do like what they call a revocable trust, or a living trust they call it, where you actually put your assets into a trust now while you're living. You are the trustee, and it basically says, well, when I die, I have appointed, it's in writing, so-and-so to be the successor trustee, and successor trustee is given directions to take all the money and split it up this way. You can avoid going through the formal probate process because the trust doesn't die. The trust is a legal entity on its own.
Right. So that if we're talking about important documents and agreements, that's another one to add to the list.
Yep.
And that's usually kind of at the end of life thought process, but that's important to do as early as you can.
Do it while you can still think through. I mean,
absolutely.
Most people don't do a will until their later years, or a trust until their later years, but you can do them early on, maybe when you're thinking more about it. And a living trust or revocable trust, that's not for everybody, but it is a way that you can set things up kind of in motion now, as opposed to having it go through a trust after you die. But that's something. Talk to your attorney about that. There's all kinds of online. You can get all kinds of forms of wills and trusts, as long as you know what you're doing. And I've seen what happens when they don't know what you're doing.
Yeah, I'm going to say, talk to a trusted attorney.
Yep.
And they can either handle it or they will get you to an attorney that can. But that's something that you want to make sure is done correctly and done right, and takes into account your whole estate, your whole assets, everything that you've got that you're dealing with.
Yeah, that's the idea.
Yes.
You're planning.
Yeah, so Terry Madigan, this has been another great show. Man, we've talked about a lot. We've talked about employment agreements, divorce of an employee. We've talked about setting up a business correctly, divorce of a shareholder or a business partner. Then we've talked about setting up wills and trust.
We've covered a lot here.
We have covered a lot.
I hear the background music, so I take it we're coming to the end now, but we could keep going for another few hours.
We could keep going. This has been another great show. Terry, thank you so much.
Thank you. I enjoyed it.
Man, this has been awesome. You've been listening to Business Matters right here on Real Talk 93.3. I'm your host, Charles Musgrove. Join us next week at 11:30 a.m. Sunday morning. Have a blessed day. Have a great week. Peace and love.
Bye.
The Business Matters Talk Show with Charles Musgrove is sponsored by the Bean Team. For all your business accounting and tax preparation needs, visit beanteam.com or call 893-7710. You can listen to more episodes of Business Matters on Apple Podcast, YouTube, or visit beanteam.com.